We Saw a Thing is a movie podcast about remakes and sequels.
We saw a thing and talked about it.
This week, the guys talk about the day the Earth stood still.
The following conversation has been edited for brevity.
The thing is, I feel like I'm about to be blown up by Gort at this moment.
Oh, really? Why is that?
The heat that comes out of that alien's eyes, that's how my back feels right now.
It's officially summer in Toronto, eh?
Feels that way anyway. We're like, today we had feels like 30 degrees. And you're like sitting at 16?
Yeah, it's about 16. Yeah, we should acknowledge the fact that I have moved from Toronto to Vancouver.
That's right.
It's nice. It's like jeans and a t-shirt kind of weather. I'm really enjoying it.
What our listeners don't know is that I hate the summer. The summer is my least favorite season. It really is like fall and then spring, then winter, then way down is summer.
Well, summers in Toronto are sticky and gross, especially when you get into like the dog days, like later in the summer. It gets real awful, which is nice because then it's balanced in January and February with just your frigid Arctic cold that makes you hate your life as well.
Yeah, there's basically like two seasons that are terrible in this city. I don't even know why I'm here, Chris. Like, why am I still here?
Dude, you should just move here and we can hang out again. It'll be great.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. We could do, I mean, either way, we're in different places when we record, always.
Yes, that's true. Yes. So even if you did decide to pack up your life and move to Vancouver, we would still be in different places to record.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. At least this way, it's kind of neat. It's like we have a entire country between us, but both of us can agree that the day the Earth stood still 2008 is a garbage fire film.
You know what's sad about it, though, is that it doesn't start as a garbage fire film, but it certainly ends that way.
Here's the problem with 2008's The Day the Earth Stood Still. For some reason, somebody looked at the original. I'm going to say it, like it's not a masterpiece film, but it's such a great idealistic film. And somebody looked at the 1951 original movie and say, you know what that needs? That needs like way more action. You do not need that.
And I think that the remake misunderstood the intention of the original film. And there's proof of that just based on the ending, right? Like the ending of the Keanu Reeves version, it missed the point because in the original, he was like, guys, if you don't get your shit together, then we're just going to come and vaporize your planet. I'll leave you with that. Cheers, bye. And in the new one, it was basically like he took one woman and her shitty kid's word for it and then went, yep, sounds good to me, and off he goes. And then the other thing they did really poorly in the new version is that at the end, when everybody's electricity goes away, I was reading some notes later that said that was permanent. Like when he left, he shut down electricity for the planet permanently. That's just not a thing anymore. And they did such a garbage job of explaining that.
Wait a minute. That was in some notes you read, but that is not what they convey at the end of that film.
It's not at all. It seemed to me like it was just like an EMP pulse or something and everything would come back eventually. But apparently the intention of that was that the electricity is just not a thing humanity has access to anymore. And that was like kind of the thing that was going to spur change in humanity. That wasn't evident at all in that movie. And so the ending felt very hollow, whereas the original, the ending felt so interesting because he'd seen that there was positivity to human beings. He'd experienced and enjoyed his interactions with the kid, with, the people he was living with, and like that, I guess it was like a halfway house or something. And you could see that he was seeing that there was some positivity to the human race as a whole, but he still had to impart his warning, and that was what he was there for.
It gives the world a chance.
Yes.
Is what it does. It's not about Klaatu sacrificing himself for the world. That's not what the story is.
No.
It's you need to change. And I'm telling the world this. Not the worst child in the world
that kid sucks.
and his mother, who is Jennifer Connelly. nobody's going to listen to those two.
No.
They listen to the being who traveled and warns them gravely.
That was what made the ending so interesting about the original, is that he was fighting the whole time to talk to humanity as a whole. He didn't want to have a conversation with just one person. The point was to give the whole planet a chance at redemption, and this remake, they just whiffed on that completely.
Well, even the beginning of the 51 version, when he steps out and they shoot, it is so intense that someone opened fire and everyone's like, no, no, no. In this one, it looks like they're coming at it from all out war before anything else.
That's crazy to me. Like, in both movies, especially in the original, it was just like, the second he left the ship, they were just trying to rip the ship apart.
Yeah, I know.
I understand in the remake when they're basically got it surrounded by the military, which how did the military get to Central Park in Manhattan that quickly? Well, who knows? That whole intro to that movie made no friggin' sense, right? Like, they were just time traveling, essentially. They're just like...
It also made it like this thing from another planet is not something to be talked about at the beginning. The 1951 version, the whole world knew what had happened. And it's on all these broadcasts in all these different countries. And that made it interesting. It made it a unifying story that the whole world was watching to see what would happen.
It reminded me a lot of the beginning to Dawn of the Dead, the original, where you're just kind of thrown in. You're not introduced to any of the main characters right away. You're just getting news broadcasts all over the world, and it just throws you right into like this chaotic situation, which I really appreciated about it. The beginning of the remake reminded me a lot of the beginning of Arrival, which is a much better movie.
Absolutely.
Go watch that instead of these. But can we talk for a second about how dumb it was that mother just let her kid go off with Klaatu? Like, it was like, oh yeah, I just met you 12 seconds ago. Definitely babysit my kid while I go out and have like a crazy passionate weekend with some dude that ends up being a huge a-hole. Like, that was weird.
It was a little bizarre, and I know it's a different time, but even still, nobody is doing that kind of activity. Nobody's putting their child with a complete stranger, regardless of the fact that he now lives down the hall from you.
Yes.
Which at least the 2008 version, like, it did a different idea of the kid's relationship with Klaatu, which, I mean, Jaden Smith is, he's terrible, a terrible person in this film. Like, all he wants to do is kill Klaatu until the moment where he needs Klaatu.
Exactly. He wants him dead until he thinks that he can bring his dead dad back to life. If there was any example that Klaatu needed of what humanity's worst, most selfish impulses are, you just only had to look at that kid. Like, the kid was not a redeeming part of humanity for Klaatu to be like, oh yeah, I should definitely sacrifice myself for you guys.
But that was not the case in the 51 version.
No.
The kid was the person who was showing him what humanity was like in a positive way.
Yes.
Bringing him to see like the Lincoln Memorial and talking about movies and like talking about currency and all these interesting things that brought a lot of friendliness out of Klaatu.
Yes.
In a way that like Keanu never felt like approachable or friendly ever.
Keanu really played it as if he was the robot. Klaatu in the original had a humanity to him. He was definitely there to impart a very important message, but he was there to do it in a very humanitarian way. He was trying to bridge the gap to be like, guys, like, we really just want to all get along. And here's the deal cosmically. And if you can't get on board with it, then we're really sorry, but you're going to have to go because we cannot tolerate this kind of thing in the universe, and you're a threat to that. I thought that was such an interesting angle for like an alien invasion story, for them to be coming and being like, listen, like, you're really concerning to everybody, so we're just going to need to nip this in the bud, guys.
The original doesn't have a villain, really. Humanity is sort of the villain, but not really. The people that Klaatu meets, for the most part, are pretty normal, likable people. Most of them even rational people. But in the remake, they tried so hard to shoehorn a villain in of the U.S. government it made it an American story, and that's not what it was.
No, dude, the thesis of that, Klaatu says very early in the original film, which is something along the lines of, fear getting in the way of reason.
Which I suppose is a very American theme at this point.
But look at how that would have been a very relevant theme in the 50s, and it's still an incredibly relevant theme now.
Yes.
We live in a world that's being very actively affected by a pandemic, and fear's getting in the way of reason of that. It's an amazing thing to look at how old that movie is and how its main theme is still so relevant today.
It is certainly very relevant. Not to mention the fact that they talk about war and how, we started playing with the atomic bomb and atomic energy, and that cannot stand. They go into how, well, now you're doing these nuclear tests, and you know what? You don't have the right to that power yet, because of what you're using that power for.
See, this is a weird watch for me, and this is a different way that I've come at these movies than all of the episodes that we've done previous to this one. I watched these movies a week ago, and normally I watch the movies like basically right before we record so that they're fresh in my mind.
Right.
I enjoyed the original. I enjoyed the remake much, much less. But these movies didn't stick with me. I haven't been thinking about them at all, even the original. Usually my gauge for that's a great movie that in my world, right, something that I'll come back to or something that's affected me is still thinking about it days later and wanting to think about the themes or, the acting or the special effect, whatever it is, whatever catches me. And a week after having seen these movies, I'm glad I watched them, but they're just not in my thoughts at all.
I'm with you there. I think the theme of the movie and the message at the end stood with me and still does. But the actual execution of the remainder of the film really didn't matter to me that much. I don't think Gort is a very effective robot alien thing. I know this is sacrilege in the science fiction community to say this, but Gort's boring. I know they wanted to make him a little bit more exciting in the remake. I don't think you did.
No.
I think you made it just like an action movie a little bit more, which was terrible. Again, the scary part of Gort not being able to be controlled unless you said those 3 words. And obviously it really affected the woman, our leading lady who was supposed to say those words at the end and was very terrified. She couldn't get it out right away, which was like, why don't you just yell at it as soon as you saw it? Like, just scream it from really far away. Like, I don't know. But that's not the point. The point was that was to influence terror and have the audience be afraid for her. I don't think it worked quite that well because I don't think Gort is an imposing or terrific villain. Because he's not a villain, a terrific alien looking thing.
I totally agree with you. And I think that was a problem that they were trying to solve in the remake, but they did it poorly. It distracted from the story because it's very clear that the people who made the remake didn't fully understand what the point of the original story was.
Or just wanted to ignore it entirely, which I thought was wrong. This is not an alien invasion movie where there is a real threat. This is... We're the threat. We're the ones who threaten Klaatu. We're the ones who tell him he can't leave and essentially end up killing him at the end with an angry mob. Like we are the villains in the piece, even though we're not. We're just humanity, and humanity has a really, really dark side to it, as we all know. There were things in the remake that just didn't make sense, like the Ark. As if like all the other biological life was fine and innocent and should get on the Ark, but not humans. It was a very bizarre image of watching all these animals going towards these giant domes. And it's like, well, I'm sorry. This is Noah's Ark now? And then the flood is going to be, you're going to annihilate all the people on the planet, which he does in the remake. They basically say like, yeah, we're coming to take out the rest of the planet. We just wanted to save there is no warning. He's there to kill us.
Yeah. I mean, it may have made more sense if instead of trying to reboot the story, they'd made this like a sequel. And it was, okay, well, in the 50s, we gave you a chance. and it's how many years later, and we haven't seen you guys really like sort your shit out. So now we're coming back and we're going to kind of like lay the hammer down, and to have humanity respond to that in a positive way would have been really interesting.
I agree. That would have been really great.
Even the whole like bit at the very beginning of the movie where Keanu Reeves is like climbing a mountain and they like take the DNA so that the alien can look like humans. Like, that was so weird. I don't understand why you do that. Like, the thing that made Klaatu so interesting is that he didn't have any powers. He couldn't like read people's minds or anything. He was somebody from a different culture, clearly, and the science and the technology was just better.
When he indiscriminately killed that officer.
Yeah.
I was like, how is anyone supposed to like this guy?
Yeah. I mean, again, just more proof that the filmmakers didn't really understand the core of the story.
They didn't get it. And you know what? You don't have to get it, because you have the 50s version, which is not amazing. It's a good film. It's got a good message. It's not a hard watch at all. But I'm with you, Chris. It didn't stick with me the way that other films, like, it is not a Dial M for Murder. It is not a Psycho. It's fine where it is, and you move on.
It hasn't stuck with me in the same way that the Thomas Crown Affair didn't stick with me. But I don't think either of these movies were as bad as the original Thomas Crown Affair.
It was a fun little jaunt going through the first one. I really had a piss poor time with the second, with the remake. Like, it wasn't interesting. I was bored. I wanted it to be over. There was no, like at least with The Perfect Murder, I was like invested in where it was going. I want to see Michael Douglas kill someone. There was like at least that kind of enthrall to keep me watching. There was none of that in the Day the Earth Stood Still 2008 version. It's just bland and boring and blah, and nobody needs to watch this movie because it's garbage.
And it wasn't bad enough for it to be fun to watch either. I will say, though, the special effects held up a little bit better than I expected.
The 2008 versions?
Yeah, the look of the movie, given how much CGI is in it, it doesn't look dated on the special effects side of things.
I didn't hate the 51 effects either.
No, they were fine.
The shade going up and there's a light coming out. I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good effect. I'm down with that. 1951, you don't have a lot to work with.
The ship was great. Gort was fine. Like,
in the original, though, Gort is like 8 feet tall. And in the remake, he's like freaking 30 feet. It's very strange.
He was ridiculous. It reminded me of those like giant robots from Days of Future Past.
Oh, yeah. Like the giant sentinels.
Yeah, the sentinels.
Yeah, that's what he is. Gort is a sentinel.
And he also reminded me of, what was it was basically a sentinel, but in the original Thor movie.
Oh, yeah. What is that thing called? The Destroyer?
Something like that, yeah. That was a bad movie, too.
Actually, they kind of exactly have the same powers.
Yeah.
Like a beam of light comes out of your face.
And they basically look the same, too.
Totally. Look, Hollywood, you can do better than Gort. Although, it's weird that Thor went up against him because he should have been like an Iron Man villain. Because he looks like Iron Man.
Yeah, that would have been a cool Iron Man villain. I don't know. They didn't really have their crap figured out in Phase 1.
No. There's no need for it.
No, Marvel Phase 1 was not where the good storytelling was for the most part.
We're not ripping on Iron Man. We're not going to do that to you on this podcast. That's not what we're here for.
No.
But the original Thor is meh.
It's super meh. That might be the worst movie from Phase 1.
I think it is. I honestly, I mean, he goes up against Gort. Thor versus Gort.
Last week, somehow I went from Thomas Crown Affair to ripping on Justice League, and now this week we've gone from Gort to ripping on Phase 1 of the MCU. What is? We can't stay focused, man. This is crap.
You know what? We have to stay focused. Release that Snyder Cut apparently worked. I blame you, Chris. You brought up Justice League last time. This is your fault.
Oh my God, dude. What are they doing? Like, actually, what are they doing?
Dude, this is your fault.
I mean, sure, I'll take the blame, and I'm absolutely going to hate watch it just out of sheer curiosity at this point. Because how can you not, right?
This is how you can not. It's going to be between 4 and 6 hours.
That's a huge win. Like, now we're talking Lord of the Rings territory.
They've also decided that it may not be a film. It may be a 4-part miniseries.
4-part miniseries? What are they doing? What are they doing?
Look, they are going to redo this entire movie.
They're throwing another $30 million behind a movie that bombed at the box office and they couldn't sort it out for a theatrical release. How is throwing more money at a pile of garbage going to make it less of a pile of garbage? They're just making it a longer pile of garbage.
Because people will definitely sign up to HBO Max for this.
100%. I am super curious to see it. I will absolutely be watching it.
I mean, I'm going to trial run HBO Max, probably watch the thing and then bail.
And my understanding is that if in Canada, because we can't get HBO Max in Canada, my understanding is it's just getting folded into Crave. So if you're a Canadian listener and you have Crave, then you're probably already fine to watch this dumpster fire. And I can't wait. We're going to have to talk about it. We're going to have to do a special episode just for that.
This is how we make our podcast now in quarantine. While we're doing a podcast, we think of ways to make other podcasts. This is happening on this podcast. Releasing the Snyder Cut, a.k.a. it's Chris's fault.
Dude. I mean, we can justify doing it on this podcast because theoretically, it's a remake of Justice League.
Dude, yes. But I'm not watching the original Justice League again. We're just watching the Snyder version.
Oh, I'm going to make you.
Don't you dare.
You made us watch Computer Wore Tennis Shoes. You're making us watch Flipper in a few weeks. How about you go straight to hell and we'll watch Justice League again?
Next time on We Saw a Thing.
Well, after a couple pretty lame-o weeks of remakes here on the old potty, 310 to Yuma is here to save the day. As is tradition, we're watching the original from 1957 and the remake released in 2007.
We Saw a Thing is hosted by Jay Kennedy and Chris Shapcott. Produced by Shapcuts Media. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And check our show notes for links to our social media and credits. And leave a review on Apple Podcasts.